Have you ever had that strange feeling of looking at someone and honestly thinking that you're more prepared, more responsible, more intelligent, more hardworking, and yet that person makes more money than you? You look at the way they speak, the decisions they make, the way they work, and inside you a mix of frustration and confusion starts to build. Because deep down you think it doesn't make sense, that the world is wrong, that something is unfair, and maybe the most painful thought of all slowly begins to form. If I'm more capable, why am I still standing still while this person moves ahead? That question hurts because it touches your identity. It shakes the image you've built of yourself over the years. It hits that quiet place where you believe effort should automatically be rewarded, where you believe competence should naturally be recognized, where you believe doing everything right should guarantee some kind of financial security. But reality keeps showing something different. Reality where people who seem disorganized, less technical, less careful, sometimes even less committed, manage to make more money than you, who wakes up early, who tries to do everything the right way, who thinks before acting, who carries a constant sense of responsibility. And the most dangerous part isn't the money you're not making. The most dangerous part is what starts happening inside your head when you see this pattern repeating. Because little by little, you start doubting yourself, start questioning your own value, start thinking that maybe there's something wrong with you. Maybe you're not as good as you think, so maybe you're destined to always stay behind. Maybe the problem is your personality, your quiet nature, your insecurity, your fear of making mistakes, your need to make everything perfect before acting. And while you're criticizing yourself internally, other people simply act, make mistakes, adjust, try again, and keep moving. Now, I want you to be completely honest with yourself, without judgment, without a mask. Just you and your thoughts. How many times have you failed to speak up because you thought you weren't ready enough? How many times have you overthought before taking a simple step? How many opportunities have you watched pass by while you were mentally organizing every possible risk? How many conversations have you avoided because you were afraid of seeming inadequate? How many decisions have you postponed waiting for absolute certainty? Because money, as hard as it may be to admit, doesn't reward only technical ability. It rewards movement. It rewards exposure. It rewards imperfect action. And maybe that's the part no one ever clearly explained to you. Because since you were young, you learned that you needed to be good, needed to be responsible, needed to study, needed to prepare, needed to wait for the right time, needed to do everything right before taking any bigger step. And that shaped your financial behavior without you even realizing it. You grew up believing that money was a direct consequence of intellectual merit, of continuous effort, of doing everything in the most correct way possible. And when you see someone who apparently doesn't fit that model earning more, what breaks isn't just your financial expectation. What breaks is your belief about how the world works. And here begins the part that may hurt to hear, but needs to be said clearly. Many times the person who seems less capable earns more because they're not trying to prove they're capable all the time. They're not stuck in the need for validation. They're not paralyzed by fear of judgment. They're not waiting for emotional permission to act. They simply act within the level of discomfort they can tolerate. Even if that involves making mistakes in public, even if that involves seeming average, even if that involves learning by doing. While you're trying to be impeccable, they're trying to be functional. While you're trying to be recognized as competent, they're trying to solve a specific problem and charge for it. While you're trying not to make mistakes, they're making mistakes quickly and adjusting even faster. That doesn't mean you have no value. It doesn't mean you're incapable. It means that maybe you're playing a different game where the main objective is to avoid failure instead of generating results. And in the world of money, avoiding failure isn't always what brings growth. There's a kind of silent anxiety that follows competent people, an anxiety that constantly says, you need to be ready, that you need to know everything before you start, that you need full mastery before charging for something, that you need to be the best before exposing yourself, and that anxiety creates an invisible trap. Because it looks like responsibility, it looks like maturity, it looks like intelligence, but in practice, it turns into delay. Meanwhile, the person who seems less capable isn't as worried about their image. They're worried about taking up space. They speak even without having all the answers. They offer even without having the perfect product. They negotiate even without total certainty. And at first you look and think that's lack of preparation, but the market often sees it as availability, and money likes availability. Money likes those who are present. Money likes those who position themselves. Money likes those who take calculated risks, even small ones, even imperfect ones, because money circulates among people who show up, not just among people who know. Maybe you're tired of hearing empty motivational phrases telling you to believe in yourself more. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about an emotional pattern that prevents you from turning your ability into income. I'm talking about that internal dialogue that says it's not time yet, that something is still missing, that it's not good enough yet, that you need to wait a little longer, study a little more, organize a little more, improve a little more, while time passes and the financial gap widens. There's also another point that almost no one talks about, which is the fear of earning more and not knowing how to sustain it, because earning more money increases responsibility, increases exposure, increases expectations, increases pressure, and sometimes, unconsciously, you prefer to stay where you are because there you already know how to survive. There you already know the rules. There you already know what to expect, even if that involves constant frustration. And while you internally struggle with fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged, fear of not sustaining success, fear of exposure, the person you judge as less capable might simply be less trapped by those layers of fear, not because they're braver, but because they accept imperfection as part of the process. Now, I want you to notice something very important. This isn't a competition of intelligence. It's a difference in financial behavior, and behavior can be trained, behavior can be adjusted, behavior can be rebuilt. But for that, you first need to stop turning this comparison into an attack against yourself and start seeing it as a diagnosis. If someone apparently less prepared is earning more than you, it doesn't mean you're worse. It means there's a practical skill related to money that you may not have developed yet, which is the ability to turn knowledge into movement and movement into income. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how this dynamic works in practice, why highly capable people get financially stuck, which almost invisible emotional mistakes prevent you from earning more, and how you can adjust your behavior without having to change who you are, without having to become someone else, without having to abandon your values, but simply by reorganizing the way you act when it comes to money. Because in the end, the question was never who is more capable. The question has always been, who can act despite not feeling fully capable? And that completely changes the game.
There's a huge difference between being capable and positioning yourself as someone who solves problems for money. And most people who consider themselves technically more prepared end up confusing these two things. You can be extremely intelligent, learn quickly, understand concepts, easily be responsible, organized, even be seen by others as someone reliable. But if you don't turn that into a clear offer, into an objective proposal, into concrete action that generates exchange, the market simply doesn't react. Money doesn't see your potential. It reacts to what you visibly deliver. And here begins the first silent mistake that holds competent people back. They live in the field of eternal preparation. They're always improving something, always adjusting something, always waiting for the ideal moment to put themselves out there. It's the course that still needs to be finished, the certification that hasn't come yet, the project that isn't perfect yet, the idea that still needs to mature. Meanwhile, the person who seems less capable is selling something simple, offering something basic, starting small, but starting. Have you noticed how this plays out in real life? There's someone you know who isn't brilliant, isn't extraordinary, but decided to start a small service. Decided to sell something simple, decided to position themselves on social media, decided to offer consulting, decided to charge for something you also know how to do, but you never charged because you thought you weren't ready enough. And every time you see that person moving ahead, that uncomfortable sense of injustice arises. But if you look at it coldly, you might realize that the difference isn't inability, it's intolerance for discomfort. Because making money requires a minimum level of exposure, requires hearing no, requires dealing with rejection, requires risking looking average at the beginning. And very competent people often struggle with this because they're used to doing things well. They don't like the idea of doing something that's not yet at the standard they consider ideal. They prefer to wait until they reach a level that makes them comfortable. But the problem is that comfort rarely appears before practice. While you're trying to protect your image as someone competent, the other person is willing to look like a beginner. And looking like a beginner is extremely profitable in the long run, because those who accept an imperfect beginning accumulate experience faster. There's also another delicate point that almost no one admits. Very responsible people tend to take on responsibilities that don't generate direct income. They help everyone solve other people's problems, are seen as support, as backup, as someone who steps in, but rarely turn that into something structured that generates money. You might be the person everyone asks for help, who solves, guides, explains. But when the end of the month comes, your bank account doesn't reflect all that usefulness. And that creates deep frustration because you feel like you give a lot and receive little. Meanwhile, someone less prepared sets clear boundaries, charges for their time, organizes what they do into a service format, turns skill into product, sets a price, establishes conditions. They may even deliver lower quality at the beginning, but they deliver within a structure that allows scale. And here comes a hard truth. Money responds more to clarity than to excellence. If you're excellent but unclear in how you position yourself, the market doesn't understand what to buy from you. The average person communicates exactly what they do, for whom they do it, and how much it costs. And clarity reduces friction. When the client quickly understands what's being offered, the chance of closing increases. Have you noticed how sometimes you over-explain what you do? How you complicate something that could be simple? How you feel like you need to prove competence before anyone even asks for proof? That's usually insecurity disguised as perfectionism. And perfectionism is one of the biggest financial blocks for capable people. It looks like quality, but often it's fear of judgment. It looks like professionalism, but often it's fear of exposure. It looks like responsibility, but often it's fear of failing in public. While you're organizing everything down to the smallest detail, someone else is learning in the real field. And the real field teaches faster than any isolated planning. These beliefs aren't conscious all the time, but they shape your behavior. You may even want to earn more, but if deep down you believe that doing so changes who you are, your brain creates small, invisible. You procrastinate, you lower your price, you accept bad conditions, you avoid negotiating. Meanwhile, the person you judge as less capable may simply not carry that emotional weight. They see money as exchange. You see it as validation. And when money becomes validation, you suffer more because every rejection feels like a personal attack. Every client who doesn't close feels like confirmation that you're not good enough. Every comparison feels like a threat. The person who treats it as a process adjusts and keeps going. Another point that needs to be said very honestly is that very analytical people tend to overestimate risk. They calculate negative scenarios too much. They imagine everything that could go wrong before imagining what could go right. And that creates an elegant paralysis, a rationalized paralysis. You say you're waiting for the ideal moment, but often you're waiting for the total absence of risk, and that simply doesn't exist. The person who seems less capable doesn't ignore risk. They just accept that risk is part of it. They make mistakes and adjust. You avoid making mistakes and end up not adjusting anything because you never started. Over time, this difference in behavior creates a massive cumulative effect. Small imperfect actions done consistently generate results. Small repeated hesitations generate delay. And after a few years, the financial distance already seems absurd, as if it were a difference in talent, when in reality, it was a difference in movement. But I want you to understand something very important here. This isn't about becoming impulsive. It's not about acting without thinking. It's not about abandoning your analytical ability. It's about using your ability as a tool, not as an excuse to postpone. Capable people who learn to act even without the complete feeling of readiness become extremely financially powerful in a good way, because they combine quality with movement, and that completely changes the game. Now I'm going to go into an even deeper point, which may explain that constant feeling of falling behind even while doing everything right. There's a trap called silent comparison. You observe final results without seeing the emotional and strategic backstage. You see the money the other person makes, but you don't see the mistakes they've already made, the debts they've already taken on, the risks they've already taken, the nights of uncertainty they've already faced. You compare your internal phase of preparation with their external phase of results, and that distorts your perception. You start building a narrative where the other person is privileged or unfairly favored, and you're a victim of the system. That narrative may temporarily relieve you, but it also takes away your power to act, because if it's injustice, there's nothing to do. If it's behavior, there's possible adjustment. And here begins the practical turning point of this subject. You need to learn to separate identity from financial results. The fact that someone earns more doesn't mean they're a better person. The fact that you earn less doesn't mean you're less capable. They're just indicators of strategy applied so far. If you keep using money as a measure of personal value, any comparison will hurt you. But if you start using it as a behavioral indicator, you gain control. And in the next part, I'm going to go deeper into exactly which specific behaviors you need to start observing in yourself too. Understand where you're blocking your income and how to change that in a practical way without having to turn into someone you don't recognize in the mirror. So now I need to go even deeper, because up to this point, we've talked about behavior, perfectionism, fear of exposure, silent comparison, but there's an even more delicate layer that almost no one has the courage to face. Many times you're not stuck because of lack of ability. You're stuck because of excess need for control. Highly capable people usually like to understand everything before entering any game. They want to know the rules. They want to predict the scenario. They want to have a safe margin. They want to minimize error. This works very well for studying, for organizing, for executing technical tasks. But when we talk about money, especially income growth, the game isn't entirely predictable. And when the scenario isn't predictable, those who need absolute control suffer more. Because earning more money almost always involves entering territories where you don't have total mastery. It involves talking to people you don't control. It involves negotiating amounts you've never charged before. It involves testing something that may not work. It involves admitting you don't know everything yet. And if your identity is built on the idea of being the person who knows, who solves, who understands, admitting you're learning in public hurts. Meanwhile, the person who seems less capable may already be used to not knowing everything. They don't carry the weight of maintaining an impeccable image. They start even without all the answers. And that gives them something you may be avoiding: speed. Speed isn't running without thinking. Speed is testing faster than you judge. There's a pattern I want you to observe carefully. People who grow financially aren't necessarily the most brilliant, but they're almost always the ones who make decisions in shorter cycles. They decide, execute, analyze, adjust. Decide, execute, analyze, adjust. Meanwhile, you decide mentally, simulate scenarios, adjust in theory, postpone execution, rethink, reorganize. And when you finally act, the timing has already changed. And money responds a lot to timing. Another sensitive point that needs to be said: maybe you're waiting for recognition before charging. You want someone to validate your competence, to tell you you're ready, to confirm you can raise your price, to publicly recognize your ability. But the market rarely does that spontaneously. Recognition usually comes after you charge, not before. The person who seems less capable often isn't waiting to be validated. They simply set a price, offer, adjust according to the response. They may get the value wrong at the beginning, may charge too little or too much, but they learn in motion. You want to get the price right before testing. And here comes something extremely practical. Those who earn more don't have less fear. They just act despite fear. Maybe you're waiting for fear to disappear. Maybe you're waiting for full confidence to arrive. Maybe you're waiting for that magical moment when you'll feel completely secure to take the next step. But confidence is almost always a consequence of repeated action, not a prerequisite. While you protect your self-esteem by avoiding risks, the other person strengthens self-esteem by facing small risks. There's also a very real issue about environment. Sometimes you're surrounded by people who earn the same as you or less than you. The standard of your group has become your reference. Rising too much may mean distancing yourself, may mean changing habits, may mean generating comments, may mean being seen as different. And that touches something deep. Belonging, being more prosperous than your circle, can create social discomfort. And the human brain values belonging almost as much as security. So unconsciously, you may be maintaining a financial ceiling so you don't break from the environment that embraces you. Meanwhile, the person who seems less capable may be in an environment where earning more is normalized, where charging is common, where growth is expected. Environment shapes ambition. Now I want to touch on something that hurts, but can free you if understood the right way. Maybe you're confusing effort with strategy. You work hard, you're dedicated, you deliver quality, but that doesn't guarantee automatic financial growth. Money responds to leverage, it responds to positioning, it responds to scale, it responds to perceived value. If you deliver a lot, but in an invisible or poorly strategic way, your income stagnates. The less capable person may be delivering lower quality, but with more visibility. They may be structuring their offer better. They may be clearly stating what they solve. They may be simplifying something you overcomplicate, and simplicity sells. There's a natural tendency in intelligent people to overcomplicate what they do. They add layers, details, long explanations, constant improvements, but often the client wants something simple, direct, and effective. The average person offers a basic solution that works. You offer the complex solution that impresses but confuses. And money doesn't reward what technically impresses. It rewards what clearly solves. Now I want you to imagine two scenarios. In the first, you keep waiting to feel ready, keep improving backstage, keep comparing, keep adjusting without fully exposing yourself. In the second, you start acting with what you already know, define simple offers, accept learning in the field, tolerate small mistakes, adjust quickly. Which of these two scenarios seems more uncomfortable in the short term? Probably the second, but which seems more promising in the long term. Also, the problem is that your brain prioritizes immediate relief from discomfort. Avoiding exposure relieves now. Avoiding risk relieves now. Postponing decisions relieves now. But that relief has a cumulative cost. And the cumulative cost appears when you look at someone who started after you and is already earning more. I need to make one thing very clear here. This isn't about becoming reckless. It's not about doing anything randomly. It's about lowering your internal standard just enough to start. It's about allowing your ability to generate income even before it reaches the maximum level you'd like. You don't need to be the best to charge. You need to be useful. You don't need to master everything to offer. You need to solve something specific. You don't need to eliminate all fear to act. You need to act despite it. Now comes the practical part that truly starts shifting the key. If you want to stop being the most capable person who earns less, you need to adopt 3 very clear behavioral changes. First, turn knowledge into a concrete offer. Stop thinking only in terms of skill. Think in terms of format. What exactly can you offer in a simple, clear, objective way? What specific problem do you solve? For whom? In how much time? For how much? Second, shorten the decision cycle. Set short deadlines to test ideas. Instead of planning for months, test for weeks. Instead of waiting for the perfect product, launch a simple version. Adjust based on reality, not just theory. Third, separate self-esteem from results. A no doesn't mean you're incapable. A sale doesn't mean you're a genius. Results are data, not identity. If you apply this, something starts to happen. You stop competing with someone else's image and start competing with your perilous version. And here's the big emotional turning point of this video. The problem was never that the world rewards the less capable. The problem is that the world rewards those who turn ability into visible movement. Stationary ability doesn't generate income. Hidden ability doesn't generate income. Overprotected ability doesn't generate income movement doies. And now I want you to pause for a few seconds and answer mentally with brutal honesty. Are you really stuck because of lack of intelligence or because of excess self-pressure and fear of acting before you feel ready? Because if that's the second option, that's adjustable. And this is where your real responsibility begins. Not the responsibility to be perfect, not the responsibility to prove anything to anyone, but the responsibility not to use your own ability as an elegant excuse to stay stuck. If you made it this far, it means this conversation stirred something inside you. So I want you to do 3 things now. First, leave your like, because that helps this type of content reach more people who are silently feeling financially undervalued. Second, subscribe to the channel, because here we talk about money as it really is, emotional, behavioral, and practical, without fantasy and without easy promises. And third, comment the word movement if you made it to the end. Comment movement. So I know you don't want to be the capable person who keeps standing still. Because from the moment you understand that the game isn't about being the best, but about acting strategically, you stop comparing and start growing. And when you start growing, the question stops being, why does he earn more than me? And becomes, what's the next step I'm going to execute right now?